Disaster. I never thought I'd be in love like...
September 11th, 2001. A day of grief. A day of courage. This is how that day unfolded.
I was in my classroom at Oak Haven High School in Memphis, Tennessee. 7:30 in the morning, our principal came on just to give us our normal morning announcements like we would hear on any given day. Went on about our business. Along about 20 minutes later, maybe, he came back on the intercom with a little bit more concern in his voice to tell us that a plane had crashed into the World Trade Center in New York City. Within 10 minutes, he was back on the intercom in a much more concerned voice level, telling us that yet another plane had crashed into the World Trade Center. And his exact words at that moment were, "We are under attack."
This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. The CNN Center right now is just beginning to work on this story, obviously calling our sources and trying to figure out exactly what happened, but clearly something relatively devastating happening this morning there on the south end of the island of Manhattan.
Believe it or not, my best friend at the time's girlfriend called me from her phone in Hernando, Mississippi, saying that we were under attack. And where is my boyfriend, Scott? And I didn't believe her, and so I hung up on her. And so she called me immediately back and said, "No, it's serious, turn on the TV." And when I did, I think I was like a lot of people, I was in disbelief.
We really didn't know. We wondered at first, might it be a hoax? Because sometimes people do ridiculous things, but it quickly became apparent that it was no joke.
I think at first, I probably thought, what a terrible accident. And it wasn't until the second plane hit that we realized that it was deliberate.
With one tower in flames, the tragedy is only beginning. It is 9:03 when United Airlines Flight 175, with 65 aboard, traveling at the speed of 590 miles per hour, smashes into the south tower of the World Trade Center.
It was the first time the country, I think, felt vulnerable. And I think that's very not typical and was not very well received, well liked. And I think it made a lot of people have a lot of emotions they didn't expect to have, but it also made people think. And I think that's what we were.
I remember it being real. It was just quiet. It was very somber. I think people were still trying to figure everything out. The news coverage was just 24/7 with the images of the rubble and of the plane that had went down in Pennsylvania. So as the stories came out about the phone calls from the planes to their loved ones, I think everybody was just in shock. I don't think anybody could really wrap their heads around what had just happened.
I think it was a mixture, depending on your age group. I mean, I think everyone as a whole was scared because they didn't know if it was going to happen again. They didn't know what to do. We were all watching the news all the time because we were like, what's happening? What are we going to do? What's our government going to do? What's our military going to do? As a young person, I was more in disbelief because I was in my 20s, and war is something that you learn about in history class or in history books. And I hadn't actually lived through anything that was major like that I can remember. And so having gone through it, like watching it happen and realizing that we're going to go into war, like this is going to happen, it was very scary. For older people, like my parents, I think they were military. My dad was the Navy, my mom was Marines. I think they were just angry. My mom was emotional, but they were both angry that this had happened, that anyone would dare attack the United States.
I was shocked. I believe everybody was shocked because that's not supposed to happen in the United States. That's supposed to happen in Eastern Europe. That's supposed to happen in foreign countries.
Hundreds of firefighters trapped in the towers. Hundreds more raced to the scene. falling debris from the collapse of the North and South Towers ignites fires in the neighboring buildings of the World Trade Center. World Trade 4, 5, and 6 are ablaze. World Trade 7, the building housing the city's command center, burns unchecked for 7 hours. At 5:20, it collapses.
You know, it's going to sound kind of crazy, but the country started pulling together almost immediately, just from the tragedy itself and having a common enemy. I obviously didn't live through World War II, but I imagine it had to be very similar to rallying together against Nazi Germany. There was a clear enemy that had clearly done, a terrible thing. It was real easy for everybody to get behind that. It really was no aspect of American culture that was, not in that unifying effort at that moment.
Believe it or not, as bad as 9/11 was, I think it was also good for the country in the retrospect that it united everyone. In my lifetime, I have never seen a country so together that looked past race, sex, color, whatever you want to say, that it was a great feeling to go and put a flag up on your porch.
The image that's burned into my memory from that I remember as the day went on, we began to see different reports, different, action that was going on. The group of firefighters that found a flagpole that had come off of one of the buildings, and they're shown raising it up. There was like 3 or 4 of them, I think, in the picture. It's a very famous picture that's won Pulitzer Prizes, and but that image, I think, just pretty well summarizes America's collective thought, was that, you may have us down, but we're not out.
One of the things that really helped, one of the things that it was a long process, but I think the fact that you found so much good in people, everybody was willing to help, everybody was willing to donate. You had people traveling all across the country to just help with the ruins and the debris. People were picking each other up, and that's kind of the true meaning of being an American now.
I think everybody joined together, and we had a definite sense of patriotism and community. We wanted to help those who were in need that had obviously been attacked firsthand. And so we were all surprised, but we all wanted to come together and help each other. But I also think what would help us move on was war. I mean, I think we all, after the shock wore off, we wanted revenge. We wanted someone to pay for doing this to us. And I feel like the war was okay. We were all on board with going to war because we had been attacked, and we were all just mad about it, angry, just hurt.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war.
It was short. We went in, I remember that I was watching the news the night that the first torpedoes were being launched against Iraq, and this was later in 2003, and it was probably, I don't know if it was 30 days or 3 months, but it was not long at all.
Leslie Haskin was an executive at Kemper Insurance on the 36th floor of Tower 1 when the first plane hit. She was one of the last people to escape the building.
There was debris and body parts and furniture falling outside the window. I lost 22 of my friends. I lost a man who I loved dearly.
Well, it certainly made me not take things for granted, not to take loved ones for granted. So when I mentioned earlier wanting to hug my daughter, I might have hugged a little too tightly, but I don't think that's a bad thing.
I will tell you that my personal views, I wouldn't say changed, but maybe they were amplified because people were more apt to express their opinion and were seeking other people's approval for their opinions, and I think everybody was trying to be like-minded as a country and as a person.
three things this year I'm trying to get really focused on is being specific about what I want to do, intentionally going after those specific goals, and being vulnerable with it. And I think not all that comes straight from 9/11, but seeing 9/11 and knowing that at any moment, you know, everything that you've been working for could be gone, including yourself. You really have to do everything you can right now in this moment and not worry so much about what's behind you or what's ahead, and do everything you have right now.
I think I realized after 9/11 how important politics was, lawmaking, how important it is to know the law, to know your rights, to be aware of what our military is doing, what our politicians are doing. I think that all of that really changed for me, because I didn't really have any interest in any of that beforehand.
I'll tell you what helped me, and that was my faith in God and the power of prayer. And I do remember that there were many public prayer events. There were churches that opened their doors to people of other faiths, and I know that's what helped me, and I'd like to think that that's what helped most of the country at that time as well.
I'm gonna have to say probably a lot of prayer. And rallying. I remember churches filling with people, so a lot of people turned back to their faith or to faith, and I think that's probably something that got me through as well.
Time, I guess. You just think about your loved ones, think about the people around you, be glad that they're there, and you lean on other people to get through tragedies like that.
I mean, two big memories stick out to me. Our head football coach, one had tried to witness into it. He had a pretty powerful statement. I'll never forget. I'm 30 now, still remember it. He said, "If I die today, I know where I'm going. I wish I could say the same for you." And to me, that was pretty powerful. You know, I don't think he felt like his life was threatened. I just thought that that was his way of saying, hey, you know, in times of tragedy or in times of moments, I think you need to know kind of where your heart is.
I really can't, you can't express the closeness that we felt as Americans. You know, in recent years, we've had all kinds of divisions, whether it's political divisions, racial tensions, divisions with LGBT communities. But after 9/11, none of that stuff, all those divisions were there, but we all were Americans. And there was a love for each other that I haven't seen since then. And I think that's one of the things that we kind of forget about.
Our country is the greatest in the world. We have the greatest people of all races, colors, sexes, whatever you want to call it. And we all have strong opinions, and we all have our own deal, and we're allowed to express them. But the country was, like I said before, was the most unified it's ever been. And I enjoyed that time. And I think the majority of the people around me that I knew, and the family I knew, and the people I socialized with, and all that stuff, and all that was pre-social media, you know. But driving down the road to see a car with a flag in the window, you were given a handshake or a nod or a wave. Where our country has lost a lot of that. If I had to say anything, I would hope that it doesn't take a tragedy of 9/11 to get us back where we were.